Welcome, everyone. My name is Libby Deniston, and I want to thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar. You are here probably with adoption on your mind, and you're in a different phase. What I love about these big webinars is that truly it's a place where you can learn from each other as well as from the speakers that you're going to hear presenting their story tonight. Because there are those of you in the audience who are already working with Lifetime. There are some of you who are thinking about getting started up with Lifetime. And then there are a lot of you who maybe this is the first time you've ever really started to learn about adoption and explore it. So I just want to welcome all of you and thank you for being here for Lifetime's webinar. And I just always like to put out a reminder too. I know some of you heard me in the sound check just a minute ago, but in case you missed that, we really want to encourage your questions and comments tonight too, and we'll try and include those as relevant and as much as we can with time. And you can do that by typing in the questions box on your screen, and I'll try and keep up. I don't have a co-host tonight. I have these two amazing guests, and I think that we will have plenty to talk about. So I'll try and keep up with your questions and comments behind the scenes. But just remember, too, that if there's something related to your adoption specifically, whether you're already working with Lifetime or you have never spoken with anyone at Lifetime yet, you can always reach out to us and talk with someone one-on-one. The phone number, the best number, I think, is our 1-800 number. Really, nationwide, you can reach us. 1-800-923-6784. And, of course, our main website is lifetimeadoption.com. And for those of you, this is kind of a little preview. We've never gotten to speak about this on webinars before, but some of you may have seen that last week we had our very first Facebook Live event. And so if you want to follow us on Facebook, you can go to facebook.com/open.adoption and find Lifetime Adoption Center's page, because we're going live again on Friday. So you can always watch for us there too. But, I just want to encourage all of you to continue to keep in touch or to get your questions answered, because truly the stories like you're hearing tonight all began with one step after another, asking questions, getting information, and learning the best possible direction for your family's own future through adoption. So just know that we're happy to help with anything we can. So I'm excited to present tonight's adoption story. I always get, I hate to say that maybe I have preference or hopes or something, but whenever there is a family who has been faithfully attending webinars and they pop up and they're just staying as in tune as possible and connected as possible, it's exciting to see them walk through their match and then be willing to come and share on the other side of a webinar. So for us, it's kind of full circle, and that is why I'm so excited about Jeff and Christa's story tonight. They had a little bit longer than expected wait, and certainly what I remember and why I was so excited to have them come on and share their story was just the details that happened as their adoption match unfolded, and as they continued to say yes in faith, step by step, towards their son. You will hear tonight a lot of twists and turns, and I think the word flexibility is huge when I think of their story, just being ready. And I really think that you're going to get a lot out of this, including just some encouragement too for those of you who maybe this is an opportunity to learn more about starting your family, or maybe you're on here and you just feel called to adopt and build your family once again. We know that it's a vulnerable call, and hearing other people's adoption stories really, I think, is one of the best ways to stay encouraged towards that goal, towards that dream. So Jeff and Christa, thanks for being here tonight.
Hi.
Hi, thanks. We're happy to be here.
I'm going to try and keep up with the photos that you sent too, and I will apologize now if I ordered them in any odd way. You can always say, no, go back to that one. That happened before this or that, but they have sent some darling photos. And because their adoption story just happened last summer, most of the photos, they're little peanuts, not terribly big yet. So so for those of you looking for sort of, well, is he walking or anything like that? No, these are recent photos, because he's a little guy. So
7 months old as of Sunday.
I cannot believe that, 7 months old.
Yeah.
Does it feel like yesterday to you guys and at the same time so long ago?
Yes.
Yes.
I could see that. You know, I would love, I pulled up this photo, and I know this is out of sequence because certainly he's out of the hospital here, but I pull up this photo of the three of you, and I just look at this, and I think of all the times you attended webinars, and even I remember times that you just reached out either to your coordinator or to me, or even typed on Facebook posts just kind of where your heart was at while you were waiting to adopt. And I wonder if you look at this photo and if you remember those days when you wondered if this was ever going to happen. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I know we had a lot of days where I know, like from my standpoint as a husband, of just having to try to still be positive and trusting in God that it was going to still happen, you know, and Christa would come home crying or upset because of this or that, and or another person at church has a baby shower and we're still wondering about our story. When is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? And just that doubt that creeps into our minds when we're waiting for something that we want so much.
Yeah. I just recently heard a song on the radio that actually really, I thought it was perfect for the adoption journey. I believe the name of the song is Still.
That's the name of the song.
Yeah, I don't know who the artist is, but in the song she says that God is moving mountains that you don't even see, and and that is really a description of an adoption journey.
I think I know exactly what song you're talking about. I can hear it. It's one of my favorites right now. I think it is it Hillary Scott?
Yes, yeah, it's a Hillary Scott.
She's from Lady Antebellum. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have a chance to listen to that song.
Highly recommend that whole album for anyone who is waiting on God for anything.
Yeah, I heard it on the way home from work today, and I thought that is a perfect description of an adoption journey. That is really what we went through. But you know, it sounds simple. Okay, I'm trusting God that He's moving these mountains that I can't see, but that's really hard. And I had really strong emotions about being a mother and wanting to be a mother, and so. Yeah, like Jeff said, I would come home crying. But seeing this picture, this was Halloween. It was the Harvest Festival at church. We dressed him up like a football, and we both wore our jerseys. And
oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. So seeing this picture, and I mean, we were just both so happy. You know, it got completely flipped around because God knows what He's doing.
And that's what I wanted to kind of highlight. You know, certainly I think adoption challenges even the strongest of faiths, but Jeff, you're actually a youth pastor, you know, so I would say that people probably assume that you walk a little easier through your faith. I know there's probably all kinds of stereotypes about your valleys and peaks through faith, but when I hear you guys both speak about those challenges, I think even hearing that it's somebody who encourages others to stay close to God, but that you had an authentic challenge through that, to me that's even it hits home even deeper. Did it surprise you at all, some of those valleys that you hit, you know, when you would come home crying? And Jeff, I want to make sure we talk too, because you mentioned kind of a heart for really helping people understand the differences in the way you both experience just the waiting and the longing to become a parent. But can you speak to those who might be questioning, well, you know, I have these friends who say I just need to pray harder, or that I need to trust God more? You know, what would you say to those people who are just wondering if there's something that they've done wrong as far as trusting in the God they believe?
I would say you're not doing anything wrong. God is, I mean, He is ultimately sovereign, and He does have a plan for us, and it is so very hard for us sometimes to wait, no matter what it is we're waiting for, and we all process it differently. Now, I know for Christa and I, we certainly, just as man and woman, we process the whole waiting thing differently. I know for Christa is probably more emotional and more involved in that manner, just the emotional, physical aspect of, wanting to be a mom and not getting pregnant and this and that and watching other people get pregnant and things of that nature, versus for me, the desire to be a dad is there, but being able to also compartmentalize, my feelings and where I'm at, and just look at it from what can I do? And ultimately, we can only control so much in the adoption process. There's so much of the adoption process that is completely out of your control. And so making sure you have your home study done and you have, all the paperwork aligned and all the little physical things that you can do. Staying connected. I know at one point we got the little business card things advertising ourselves, and we would just go around to coffee shops and put them in there just because that would help us in the waiting process, because we could physically do something. Anyone that would say, oh, you're not praying enough, or you're sinning, or you're this or that, and that's why you haven't gotten it, that's hogwash. That's the opposite. I mean, certainly we're called to pray, to wait on the Lord, but he also calls us to be people of action. And so it's a balance of trusting God, but also seeing all the little things that you can do, and keeping yourself busy, but also making sure we don't forget life. I know Christa and I, we had a European vacation plan before we got matched and Paul was, born and everything. We had this whole big vacation plan for our 10th anniversary. And it's, the people at Lifetime always encourage us, keep living life. Don't just go into this adoption hole where you're just waiting, because you will drive yourself nuts. Get involved in what you do.
I love that you brought that up, because that is a particularly special part of your story, the fact that you had this vacation because you thought, let's make use of this time. We're not parents yet. We can do this right now, and then you get matched. And we have had some people ask, how long was their wait? And you guys waited with Lifetime just over 2 years, is that right?
Yeah, we had. I had originally talked to Kim a year before we actually signed up, because we thought we had another opportunity that didn't pan out, and so we waited that one out. And when that didn't work out, we said, okay, we're going to go ahead with Lifetime, and then we waited over 2 years.
Mm-hmm. So how long, maybe for those who are kind of wondering, should I take the next step with adoption, how long did it take both of you to decide just to begin pursuing adoption, but then also to decide, okay, we need to expand our search or change our approach, and we're going to go with a place like Lifetime? Can you talk about that sort of leading up to journey?
Yeah.
To it?
So, like Jeff said, our 10th anniversary, we've been married just a little over 10 years. And so the first 5 years of our marriage, we were just kind of waiting, Lord, give us a baby. I was waiting to get pregnant, and it just didn't happen. And so then after our 5th anniversary, I started talking about adoption, but Jeff is a man that likes to pray and think about it and make deliberate steps. So I started doing the research and reading and sharing with him what I found and the information, and so I would just bring it up gently every few months, and eventually one of the big obstacles for Jeff's faith was the financial part of it, because that's what he does. He does finances, and looking at ours and looking at the cost, it just wasn't adding up for him at all. And you know, so I would bring it up every once in a while, and finally I was just like, look, we have a lot of friends and family, and the Lord provides. If this is the steps He wants us to take, it's going to come in. And so he was like, okay, all right, fine. So it really took a good 7 years for us, and about 2 years of talking about it before we finally took the big step and even called, and then another year after that until we signed up. So yeah, it was a long process just to get there.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think sometimes that part gets overlooked. When, you know, someone adopts, they often focus on, okay, once they decided to adopt, how long did it take? But that really there was a softening of your hearts, a changing of your hearts, and a preparation time, even just to decide, yes, we're going to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that might comfort a lot of people maybe who are wondering, is something, you know, is this an awkward season, or is this normal? Or and I think it's different for everyone. Some people come together quickly. Some people, you know, sometimes it's a husband saying, honey, you know, it's time to let the fertility stuff go. We need to move in this direction. And sometimes it's the wife saying that. So I really love hearing that side of it, because to me that's just as special as the moments just before meeting your little Paul the bear.
Yeah.
So let's see here. I wanted to make sure we caught up on some questions if I needed to, make sure they're relevant. Jeff, you mentioned kind of how it was different for you versus Christa. Can you maybe speak to the men out there who may really relate to what you said about how you kind of compartmentalize it? You don't. It wasn't something you cried about, but that they're not really sure, what do I do with all these emotions my wife is putting out there? I don't know what to do. How did you learn, maybe at the risk of sounding, I don't mean this to sound bad, but how did you learn not to make it worse by saying something that sounded like you didn't get it?
I think it's just a matter of getting to a place where you just recognize that her crying is her processing, or her emotions are processing what is going on, versus for me, I've always, you know, most guys process things differently, and since we don't have the physical aspect that just goes along with not being pregnant, we don't have that going on in our mind and our bodies. And so recognizing that those emotions aren't directed at me. You know, I don't have to take it personally if she's crying or she's upset. Recognizing that there's a lot of things going on there, and all she really needs is someone to listen and to be that shoulder to cry on and that hand to hold, and I don't have, there's nothing I have to fix.
I have the best husband.
And then I think it's also important the other way for, you know, any of the ladies out there to recognize that just because the guy's not crying and breaking down, it's not that he doesn't care. It's just we're able to separate it and distract ourselves with everything else we might have going on, and being busy and doing work and this and that, since we don't have the emotional side of it as easily. That our lack of emotion isn't we don't care. It's just how we're wired, I guess you could say.
Yeah. That's really wise advice, because I would say, as a woman, I know I'm a little guilty sometimes. You get into your own emotions and then you think someone's not reacting like me, so they must not want to understand or really truly understand or even feel the same way I do. And that sometimes I've spoken with other adopted moms who almost felt surprised to find out how much the adoption journey was stressing their husband out, just because he wanted to be a dad, you know, and to reach that goal. So I'm glad that you spoke kind of to both sides there. I want to make sure, too, that we also have time to talk about what you referenced about having the European vacation and how things changed, because we can look at this photo on the screen here and see just how tiny your little boy is. And that what I love, too, about your story, and I kind of gave a little bit of a preview about this when we shared that you were going to be on tonight, that you were matched. And a lot of times I think people think, well, all I want to know is a due date. You know, once I'm matched, I'll know a due date, and I'll know when this story is going to come to the place I've been waiting for. And so I think sometimes adoptive parents almost let their guard down when they're matched in a little bit of a way, because they're thinking, well, maybe she's not due for 2 months or 3 months or something, and they're moving through that. But when we talk about last-minute adoption decisions or plans, sometimes that includes people who were already matched and expecting a different due date than what actually happens, as with your case. It's not always just a birth mother's last-minute decision, but that sometimes it's things happen and she goes into labor, or that baby needs to come a lot sooner than expected. And so I would love, can we talk about, you waited and then you finally reached this match. Can you talk a little bit, maybe in hindsight, about just how you felt accepting the match? Did you ever have sort of a feeling like this is it, or were you just sort of unsure and just panning it out? Because sometimes people share a feeling of meant to be, and other times people say, you know, I just really didn't know, I just kept going. What was that like for you guys once you were matched?
I think it was more like the really didn't know, just kept going. Because so we heard about our birth mother from a family friend, and so we exchanged phone numbers and gave her a call, and there was sort of a, okay, we're matched, but never really we're matched. And then all of a sudden she was sending us sonogram pictures, and that was all really exciting. But really we were only talking to her for 3 weeks, and I think she had only talked to the coordinator at Lifetime a couple of times, just for some very basic paperwork. And then all of a sudden we get a call that she's sick in the hospital, and we decided we were going to go out there and check on her, you know, because we're in California, and at the time she was in West Virginia. And so it was very sudden. We both called in sick to work and decided we were going to go out there on a Friday. So we jumped on the next plane that left in the morning, and we found the hospital she was at. And then when we were changing planes, we got a text from birth dad that they were taking her in for a C-section, and he was being born.
Oh my goodness.
It was very, very sudden. So then we had to get on a plane from Minneapolis,
Minnesota, and
we were flying into Dulles, and the 2 hours with no phone, and he was being born. It was a pretty nerve-wracking flight for both of us. And then
I love the story. Was it the rental car? Jeff, I think, was telling me how you actually, the mama bear came out in you when you were trying to get a rental car.
Yeah, I was like running through the airport, and we got to the rental car shuttle, and it was just sitting there. And I said, Jeff, go ask him. And he was like, you're fine. I said, no, I'm asking. So I went up and I said, hey, I have a baby in the NICU. Let's go. And the guy was just like, okay. He called it in, and we left. So, you know, then we
got to do that.
In the door, and I was in and out with that rental car in 10 minutes.
Wow. And Jeff, I remember you talking about that plane ride that she was just describing, because you had just started to get to know these birth parents. So, you know, a lot of people wouldn't, some matches unfold fast, some just sort of unfold at a slower, more natural pace. But then to find out that this woman is sick and she can't even communicate, so now you're hearing from birth father, and then all these unknowns, and just before you even have to board the next plane, I mean, I can only imagine your heart is up in your throat just wondering, okay, what questions should I be asking? What should I even be praying about? And it touched me so much when you said, well, Christa was trying to keep busy, but I just really learned what it meant to pray. Can you talk a little bit about those moments in the airplane getting to your baby?
Yeah, so I mean, it was kind of a whirlwind 24 hours because we had gotten matched. We had talked to birth mom a couple times. We talked to birth dad once. And then all of a sudden, Christa got a text message that birth mom was getting life flighted to the hospital. And then within the week, birth dad was calling us that they were, putting birth mom under and all this kind of stuff. And so we decided we were going to fly out there. And I'm getting us Chick-fil-A in Minnesota when I get a text message that they're taking her in for an emergency C-section. And we immediately we called both of our parents, we called our pastor, we called Lifetime, we called our lawyer, and in about 20 minutes called everyone, said the baby is being born, and then we had to get on an airplane. And of course, on an airplane, we had to turn off our cell phones. We couldn't get updates. I couldn't, go up to the cockpit and ask them to radio down to find out information for us. I couldn't make the plane fly faster. I couldn't skydive down to the hospital. There's nothing I could physically do. And that can be difficult, to be in a position where you're worried about so many different things. You're worried about your baby being born. You're worried about birth mom. You're worried about what's going on. You don't know what in the world's going on. And so I was in a place where all I could do was trust God and cry out to him in prayer. And, being a youth pastor and being in ministry and things like that, yeah, I pray, I do all this stuff. I've been doing it for a long time, but it really just clicked for me that, we pray to show a reliance on God and his sovereignty and his power, and that through that prayer we're comforted, we're given a peace that certainly surpasses understanding. And, we were both able to make it through that 2-hour plane flight without going crazy, breaking down completely. And, it's just kind of that realization of, this is why we pray. This is why we have people that pray for us, because through it God works and he gives us peace and understanding that can only come from him.
Yeah. I'm seeing some comments just popping up about how they really appreciate you speaking to that, because I will say in almost every match, we work with couples who are so anxious to get to that match, and they struggle through the waiting just to be matched. But then that a lot of times I think that it surprises them that they're still struggling with that that wait anxiety of moving through those moments, even to the point of now we just can't wait to bring our baby home. So there's kind of always this next waiting. Like you kind of started us off tonight saying, there's always something you're waiting on next. But certainly when you have a preemie here, now how early was Paul born?
He was born at 32 weeks.
Oh my goodness. And so how long did he actually have to stay in the hospital?
And then he was in the hospital for 32 days.
Okay. So a month or more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you're out of state. And it kind of gets confusing, but I just want to add, because we understand the legal side of it, when you're prepared for a birth mother in one state, you usually kind of get an understanding of how the legal process will go with your state and her state. But then when In their situation, and I won't get too much into this because it can get really confusing,
Yeah.
but in their situation, they had to totally switch gears even with the legal side of things because she ended up being life-flighted, right, to a different state. It was just over the state border, and that changed the whole legal process of what the match would need too. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, flexibility is what comes to mind when I think of Jess and Christa's story, because a lot of people would have easily gotten hung up on, what? This is the way it was supposed to go. What do you mean it's going to be like this now? And instead, you just kept going, okay, what do we need to do next? What's next? So I'm going to bring up this cute little photo here of your little guy. And is this, look at all that hair.
Yeah.
Is this the first moment you got to see him, or how long did it take you once you got to the hospital? How long did it take to get to see him?
Well, we got to the hospital about 2 hours after he was born, and probably within an hour of getting there, we got to see him.
Yeah, he was already down in the NICU, and birth dad went down with us. He had the bracelet for the hospital, and he walked us in to go see him. This is maybe, I think he's 3 or 4 days old. It's after he got his breathing tube off.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's also interesting to just make sure that it's highlighted that meanwhile, this birth mother that you had just started to get to know, she was not able, not able to communicate, and so you're dealing mostly with, birth father, which I think might surprise a lot of people too. And so did you already have a connection with him when the match started, or was this sort of your first interaction with him?
Well, we had spoken with him over the phone once because
Mom made him.
yeah, it was birth mom's decision to make an adoption plan, and so he finally, she said, I really want you to talk to these people. So he agreed, and we had a phone conversation. But it was also him that called us. He called us when he got scared at her health issues. So he didn't know who else to call. And so that's why we were on our way back there, really to be with him and make sure she was okay. We were just expecting to go for the weekend, make sure she was recovering and then come home because he wasn't due for 2 more months.
Right. Which is
yes.
such perfect timing. I mean, the fact that you were already halfway across the country when you did find out that he was going to have to be taken in an emergency C-section. I'm so glad that you were already on the way, but at the same time, we've had some good questions pop up. I know that there can be challenges or uncertainties when you're looking at a preemie, certainly a preemie as little and as early as he was. How did you cope with some of those? Because a lot of adoptive parents in particular would have a hard time continuing forward until they had more certainty about, what's the health like, what are the challenges that might be needed, how much time do we need away from home. Sometimes there are people that get hung up on really wanting more answers, and you guys instead, I mean, God positioned you halfway across the country before you could even find out, and you'd already planned on going to just be there for her, which honestly is such a loving action to just take for any woman who's thinking about adopting, to choose adoption and to choose you for her child. I could see, even if she hadn't delivered, how much that would have spoken to her once she regained health, to know that you just cared enough to come and just be a support. But then also, here he comes, he's born. Did those thoughts go through your head that maybe you were a little scared or a little nervous, like, gosh, he's really young, what should we expect?
You know what, after we were there and even on the way, when we were on our way, it didn't occur to me that he could be born early. you know, we had our mission and we were going to go do it. And then when it was, I kind of didn't process it until I saw him. And after I saw him, it was done. I was in love. So I was going to be there for him as long as I was allowed, or, you know, forever, whichever came first.
You were in.
Yeah, I mean, we were in. I mean, I know for me, it hit me when I saw the sonogram pictures, when our birth mom sent us that, and I saw this little baby inside a complete stranger's body, but, you know, in my heart, you know, he was my son already, and so there's no doubt in my mind that, you know, when we got to the hospital and we saw him, that, you know, we would do anything and everything we had to for him, because in my heart he was already my son. Not, yeah, and there wasn't any question in my mind about it, and so we were gonna, you know, work whatever we had to work out if, you know, we had to. So we just started. I'm very step-by-step type of a person, so I just started, all right, we need to call our works, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and get this all in place, and we just started going down the list.
Since you guys had to, since you were traveling thinking this is just a weekend trip, and then you find out, oh, he's born, and then we're looking at a 32-day hospital stay. We had a great question come up that said, so how did you manage getting everything you needed that you would have probably brought with you if you'd known he was coming?
Well, this is where
about that.
Yeah, this is where like, you can really see God had his hand on this whole plan. It ends up that the hospital he was born at was just an hour from my sister's house. So
oh, wow.
We called my sister, and she said, come stay with us. And so we would drive down to the hospital at 7 a.m. every morning and drive home at 9 or 10 at night. And we stayed, both of us stayed with my sister until the first papers were signed. And we were given custody of him for after about 2 weeks. Roughly 2 weeks. And then at that point, the social worker helped us move into the Ronald McDonald House that was on site at the hospital, which was really, really a blessing. There was a really, really great social worker that took care of us, and so our expenses were mainly food and a rental car while we were there.
There's Paul.
And then that's amazing. I know, I've been hearing his little squeaks and his toys and his pet. It's so sweet.
And I was just going to add, and we also had already, at the prompting of Lifetime, we had all of our home study and all those type of papers that we might need already kind of packed, so we had brought them with us just in case. And thankfully in this day and age with email, you know, we had a friend that was staying at our house because we have a little dog, and our family, and between our friend and our church family and everything, they were able to email us this or that if we needed something. And then not to mention, we had people sending us baby clothes left and right.
To your house, or to
Christa's sister's house.
Oh, how amazing!
I think we were getting more mail than they were.
So would you mind also, there were a couple questions here, because, you know, in sort of an average adoption, when the baby's only in the hospital for a few days, usually the biological mother's insurance covers up until when the adoptive parents sort of, take over. And sometimes there's some backtracking legally, and that's kind of a whole other topic of itself, where your insurance picks up, but it's kind of retroactive. But in situations like this, where, like you said, it took a couple weeks, and then did you say you were given custody, or by then her rights were irrevocable?
So we got there, birth mom was still really sick, and so she wasn't able to sign anything until she was healthy and deemed able to sign and everything. So he was born on the 12th of October, or August, and then we got custody on September 2nd. And so her insurance had to cover those first 2 weeks, and then our insurance picked up the day we got custody. We had some little ups and downs with the hospital as far as that kind of stuff is going, but it's all worked out fine, and everything's kind of squared away there. But it got
kind of hard to answer. Well, in every hospital, sometimes that's the thing too. It's not always state laws involved. Sometimes it's just hospital policy and who they, how easily they make things to deal with or to work out. But do you have any tips kind of in hindsight of what you might tell other people when they are at the hospital and they're looking at, preparing for, getting the baby on their insurance in the future or weeks over?
Yeah, I would say really make friends with your social worker at the hospital.
Yes.
Because they can move mountains for you. We had a little bit of a rough start because I, as typically, was over-emotional. But eventually, like we had a good heart-to-heart talk, and then she was able to direct me in all the people to talk to and where to go. And basically, at the hospital we were viewed as visitors. All the nursing staff and the doctors knew that we were the adoptive parents, but until we had that legal paper that said that we were the in custody, yeah, the legal guardians, they couldn't really talk to us at all. So they made arrangements, because I was at the hospital all day staring at them, to get us some visitor bracelets that allowed us to go in. But generally their policy at the hospital we were at was just, the two birth parents had the bracelets, and that was all. They could bring in 2 visitors, but they had to be there with them. And after being there for a while and talking to everybody and best arrangements we could make, they did give us some visitor bracelets that they allowed us to go in to the NICU and sit with him, since there was nobody else to do it. So
okay.
It was they were great. I know there are policies and things, and they all have good reasons, but again, the social worker was reasonable with it.
And all the nurses and doctors like presents.
Yeah.
They like
that.
bagels, donuts, chocolate, all those things.
Cookies, donuts. I have heard that before, and Marty actually always recommends, being good to that hospital staff, because
yes, for sure.
if they know they're appreciated, they're probably more likely to hear you out, and sometimes also it's just that they don't always understand. It may be the first time or one of the first times that they've ever seen an open adoption play out, and they might feel a little guarded, like what's going down? I've never seen this kind of activity going, and that you may find, some of you listening, that you're part of educating that hospital staff in a gentle and loving way.
We had to do quite a bit of that.
Yeah.
Because he'd have different nurses all the time, because the nurses would go through rotations. We didn't have the same nurse more than a couple times, and so we were always having to explain the whole story and everything that goes down, and you just have to be open and willing to talk and share your story, as tiring as it might be, or as much as you might want to keep things private. It helps really open the doors and educate everyone involved, and the hospital staff, ultimately was great. They were super kind to us.
So, since your match went unexpectedly and she ended up sick and then delivering so much sooner than she planned, we had a great question come up that said, so is his birth mother better now, and what is that relationship like? So can you talk about, did you have time at the hospital with her, or with the birth father? Like you said, I mean, he was there when you got there. Well, how did that continue to unfold? Because essentially you were still getting to know each other.
Yeah, so after they delivered Paul, she was sick for a few more days, and then she started recovering, and it's still kind of a mystery what was going on, but I know the Lord had His hand on her as well. So I sent flowers up, and I sent a thank you note up, and a few different little gifts to her room until she was ready to meet us. She was not feeling well and didn't feel she looked well, so we just waited on her time until she was ready to see us. But I was texting with her back and forth, and eventually she was ready, and we made a time to go up and see her. And we brought her a nice little gift. I got her a little necklace with Paul's birthstone on it, and brought that up to her, and it's in a little heart, and she still wears it. And so we went up and we talked for like an hour and a half, and it seemed like a minute. It was really great, and we got to know each other better. And then just a couple days later, she was released from the hospital. They did have to stay around the area for a while until all the papers were signed and everything. So we did get to visit with them a few more times.
That's right, because they lived in the other state, so they had to go back home.
Right.
Okay.
So it's been great since. Like we won't hear from her or him
either one of them
for a while, but then they'll pop up again, and we've been sending pictures about once a week, or like maybe every few weeks when milestones happen, something mostly text and sometimes by email. But we did make a post-adoption agreement with them for at least every 3 months for the first 2 years, and then every 6 months after that to send them pictures. But we've been doing a lot more often than that. And then they do have the option to visit if they want to come out here around his birthday. So we're hoping maybe that could happen.
Yeah, was that their idea to draw up that agreement, or was that something you felt like proposing to them? How did that come around? Because that's something, it's a hot topic, but it just seems to vary story to story.
Yeah, it was
mutual.
It was mutual. The birth mom came up with the terms that she wanted, and we were fine with that. And then birth dad wanted the same thing. He wanted his own separate, so we basically have the same agreement with both of them. Yeah.
Okay, well, and I know that you actually had an opportunity to see Paul's birth father within the last, was it pretty recent? Just because he happened to be kind of nearby, and you guys just decided out of the goodness of your hearts to, it was just kind of a unique situation, right, Jeff? You were talking about how they kind of are here and there, and sometimes that's very common with birth parents that we've worked with, is that a lot of times they're looking at adoption because their life isn't in a settled down place. And that's often what they admire in adoptive parents. And so I think when you understand that, it makes it easier to understand, okay, well, sometimes we hear from them, sometimes we don't. But that you mentioned you actually saw birth father pretty recent. Was it pretty recent?
Yeah, it was a couple, probably 2 months ago now. He was traveling through and had stopped in San Diego, and he contacted us, and he think like messaged us on some kind of social media. I forget what it was, and just said, hey, I'm in town. I just wanted to ask you guys some questions about something here in San Diego. You guys told me if I ever needed anything, you would help me out. And so we gave him a call, and he was kind of he was just downtown here in San Diego, and so we had just finished cooking dinner, and he didn't have any dinner or anything, and so we brought him dinner. We were able to just bless him a little and just share with him, and and just it was a nice little visit. It wasn't anything real long, but it was a great opportunity. It was a complete surprise. It wasn't super planned or anything, but just that continued theme of being flexible and being willing.
Did you feel like you had to? Because I think some people would say, well, what if we were busy? Would we have had to drop everything? What would you have done if it didn't work out?
No, we didn't feel like we had to. And he wasn't even looking for anything. He was looking for some advice on where to stay, or like what's a good place to stay, and this and that. And we asked him if he had had dinner yet, and so we were just like, if we had been in the middle of something or at an event, or we would have told him that and just been honest with him. And I think he would have understood. I didn't feel obligated to at all. And he wasn't trying to put that pressure on us at all either.
And that's, I think, what I love about open adoption is just coming to realize that it's just relational. It's not something that has to be forced. That you also come to care for these people on your child's birth family side, and that if it works out to having a visit or some kind of contact that's not in the written agreement, that kind of like anything, you can play that by ear and pan it out. But I love the way you said, we just kind of blessed him for a little while, and that you also just see that as an opportunity, not just, hey, we kept our end of the bargain, but rather it's an opportunity to continue growing that relationship. We had a great question here that said, because Christa mentioned how it took a little while for Paul's birth mom to feel up for company, and then you had your visit, but did she or Paul's birth father ever spend time with him at the hospital? Did you end up kind of juggling that at all?
Oh, yeah, that was, I do have to admit that was rough for me, because I'd already spent a couple weeks sitting with him, and of course they still had visiting rights until we had custody, so a couple of times she was able to come down to the NICU floor, and we would step out, and I was happy for Paul that his birth parents would, they still love him. I know that they still love him. So I was happy about that, but at the same time I was so jealous because I'd already attached to him. So, that was another way for me to step back and trust the Lord that the adoption was still going to happen.
I think that's a real response, probably even if it was a year from now, that you might still battle with some of those until you reach a point in your relationship where maybe, I've heard this in other webinars, but also in other adoption stories I've seen just in general in other adoption resources, just that sometimes that feeling, it just exists, and then maybe you'll have an opportunity to reach a point where you can talk about it with her and say, you know what, I'm so glad you're in our lives, but I have to admit sometimes I feel like this. And she might say, gosh, I feel like that too, and you just sort of hash it out. But I would say that's not an unusual response, and that it is about what do you do with it, like you just said. You had to back over.
It's something that really meant a lot to them and us, when we're signing papers and doing everything, and it's an emotional experience, for them and us. I know at one point Christa looked at them both and said, you guys are Paul's family, and so you're now our family. And, that I hadn't really thought of it that way, but it's true, They're part of his family, extended family and everything, and so that makes them a part of our family. And so that's how we try to look at it. It's not an inconvenience if they text message us or call us or anything like that. They're part of the family now.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. What a beautiful way to put that. Do you mind answering some logistic questions? We had a great question about the wrap you're wearing on the plane here.
Yeah.
For traveling with baby, especially I'd say such a little guy, somebody asked, what is that wrap? Because I would love to add that to my diaper bag.
Oh, you know what? I'm not even sure what it's called. Somebody gave us an Amazon gift card while we were back east, and I went on Amazon and
want to go find it?
Got a wrap. It's just a really, really stretchy, long piece of jersey material, and then my sister showed me how to put it on, and we practiced with a bag of rice. And
how smart!
And then it was really, really great on the airplane. That's when we got on the airplane. We took a picture before we took off, and then shortly after that,
he blew out his diaper.
Yeah, he blew out his diaper and came out of the wrap.
Oh no!
When we were taking off, I was mid-diaper change.
The joys of parenthood.
Yeah.
And a fun thing, we got to bring him home on my birthday.
Oh, so this is your birthday?
Yeah. On my birthday, we got to bring him home, finally.
Oh, but you weren't able to stay the whole time, is that right, Jeff? You had to go home for a little while?
Yeah, I stayed until the papers were signed. So the papers were signed on September 2nd. I left about a day or two after that to come home and to do some work so that we could spread out our vacation and leave time and everything. And then I flew back when he got released from the hospital so that I could help bring him home.
And we did have a question that said, so how did your work handle that with you being gone? Each of you were gone so long, Christa the whole time, but also, Jeff, you were gone 3 weeks. So did you have to take a leave, or how did that work out, especially since it was so last minute?
Yeah, so we called in sick on the Friday that we left, and then because I was able to, a couple, I just called my work and I said, I'm not coming back, we have a baby. And so my payroll clerk sent me the leave papers, and I filled them out and sent them back. And so my leave officially, my bonding leave is what we used in California.
Yeah.
We have a little bit of paid bonding leave, and so I used that for the entirety of the time I could. I think it was 6 weeks, and then I used some vacation pay after that. And then when I was done with my vacation and everything, then Jeff applied and used his bonding leave. And the time that he spent back east was vacation pay. So we had, planned to use it, which the European vacation, I had made Jeff promise me on our honeymoon that we would go to Italy for our 10th anniversary. So he had stayed for 10 years, and he had the trip all planned, and we were so excited. We were going to go in September, and then the baby was due in October, but then he came in August. So that was the first thing we did on Monday after he was born was call and cancel our trip. And luckily, because my husband is a planner, we had some vacation insurance, and we're going to convert to an Alaska vacation now, much cheaper.
So we had bought in the travel insurance because we knew anything can happen with adoption, so we got a good chunk of it refunded cash, and the other we got a credit to do another trip. So we're doing that this September.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, and that's the reality. We have called people off of cruise ships before, or even on their way, you know, to, I remember a couple stories where we actually happened to reach someone as they were just leaving town to go on one vacation, and they just about-faced and went the other way towards the baby. And that's what happens sometimes.
Yeah. I had told Patty before that we had this vacation planned, and she said, well, what if you get matched? And I said, then I'll jump off the side of the cruise ship.
So let's see. There were a couple great questions I want to get back to, but I also want to make sure that everyone can see how he's grown and changed some.
He started off at 4 pounds, and now he's over 14.
4 pounds. Oh my! And so 7 months old, 14 pounds. He's still a little teeny peanut.
Yeah.
We had a great question. This is always a favorite question of mine, and I can't believe we haven't touched on it yet. But I know that the situation, the circumstances behind how you became matched were sort of unique in that the birth mother involved, she had actually chosen adoption before, reached out to the people of that child, and it just wasn't the right time for them to add to their family, but they connected you guys together, and that was the perfect match. But she still had a choice, and as she's getting to know you, and then before she decided to start sending sonogram pictures, did she ever talk about maybe what she liked about you guys, or what made her feel good about moving forward with the match, or was it just sort of, this is how it is and it's going?
We just had a really good, like 45-minute to hour-long phone conversation the first time we talked, and I think one of the things that she's always expressed is that she wanted her children to know each other, and we do live close to a family that has adopted his older sibling, and we are friends with that family. So now they do visit at least once a month, and his sibling is super excited about it. He's 6 years older than Paul, and everybody's just in love with it, and we love it because it's just more people to love Paul.
Yeah.
So that is one of the main reasons that she had for picking us, is that the kids could have a relationship.
How unique. That is so special. There was a great question here, and this one is often a common question too. How did you come to the name? Did she just leave that in your hands, or was that something you discussed with her or with the birth father at all?
Well, that was a little touchy, actually, because she was not able to communicate when he was born. Birth dad went ahead and named him. So that was his name in the hospital, and it's still his legal name. When we were finally able to meet her, and Jeff and I had talked about a few different names if there was a boy, and so when we were finally able to meet her, she said, what's his name? Are you going to change it? And she was totally open to it. I said, well, if it's okay with you, you know, this is what we'd like to name him. And we said Paul Edward. And come to find out, Edward is one of his biological grandfather's names. And
oh, wow.
so that made birth father really happy, and it really connected it for us because it's also an adoptive grandfather's name. So it was another thing that the Lord had His hand on.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Those give me chills when I hear those connections because that's just so special to be connected to both sides of that.
Yeah.
Have you already sort of, when you put him to bed, do you have sort of a little bedtime story about his adoption that comes up time to time, or how do you already sort of share his story so that maybe it becomes part of your regular family thing?
Yeah, I had started collecting children's books about adoption quite a while ago, so I have quite the library. We're not quite to the place of reading them yet because he's had a little bit of rough start with sleep, but we do talk to him. We asked, birth mom what she wanted to be called, and so I talked to him about that name quite a bit, and he does have his brother that he visits, and so he's just going to grow up with adoption being just a regular part of his life. It's not going to be weird or a strange surprise later on.
Now, this is a great question. I know that this comes up, especially for a lot of people before they're even matched. Had you decided to set a nursery up before you were matched, or until he was home?
Oh yeah, as soon as we were signed up, I started shopping and Pinteresting and designing, and we had the nursery up within 3 months. So it was sitting there ready to go for a couple years, but I didn't go in there too much. It has a big closet in it, so it was kind of a storage closet. But other than that, I had a rocking chair in there that I went in and prayed occasionally. So it was sitting there ready. We also have a twin bed in there, so it was kind of the guest room too. I have it all decorated with It's a Small World in primary colors so that it was good for a girl or a boy.
We had a couple questions that just said, oh, what a great idea to talk with birth mom about what she would want to be called. And I think that's such a special opportunity if it comes, you guys have just blessed us so much with I feel like this is really all about sort of the little details. And not just the big umbrella, this is how it happened, but what I'm getting from your story, and I think what our audience is really just pulling together is just hearing you're real people that had a real experience that was up and down, and that even in the midst of bonding with this baby, you still dealt with some of those hard emotions or questions, and certainly waiting to get home. And we're just thankful for the opportunity to hear your side of things, both of you tonight. So thank you for being with us. I wanted to pull up, this is the last little slide I have here because he has changed so much. And so smiley and just such a sweetie. So if you're online, you're about to get blown up with cute because he's all over that.
He's the smiliest baby we've ever seen.
Now is because he was a preemie, so is he a little bit younger? Have you kind of dealt with, okay, his milestones don't hit when, say, a normal 7-month-old, a full-term 7-month-old, I should say. What has that been like, just adapting to life with a preemie?
Yeah, so we went from learning and experiencing the world of adoption to now learning and experiencing the world of preemies, which is a whole other world. But we've found a lot of great resources. I mean, there are support groups, there are all kinds of resources and stuff online. Our insurance has a nurse that calls me every month and talks about his milestones. His doctor's office has all kinds of extraordinary come and let us check him every month things, and there's all kinds of education. But he has been doing fantastic. As far as being a preemie, he doesn't have a lot of issues. Just very minor behind milestones. But then you have to do adjusted age versus
his actual age.
Yeah.
And really, he's in between. He does some things that a normal 7-month-old would, and then he does some things still that a 5-month-old would. And so it's that balancing game of recognizing that, some things he's still going to be behind on. He's still catching up size-wise, and the doctor told us, it can take 2 years before they actually catch completely up, and just kind of in life in general, you just avoid comparing. Our church has had a baby boom, and so there's lots of babies, and it's just you just try not to compare and say, oh, your baby's doing this, mine's not, and you just realize every baby, every child is different, and kind of go with the flow.
Wonderful. I know that you're probably either trying to feed yourselves or get ready for bedtime, so I don't want to take up too much more time, but I just wondered if you had any final words, as I know that you both seemed eager to just come on and be an encouragement for people who are waiting for their own baby, for their adoption to happen. How would you like to wrap up tonight? Is there anything, even if it's a practical tip, is there anything on your heart you want to share with us before we close out?
It's worth it. The waiting, the tears, the money, the concerns, all of it, it's all worth it. And, keep going. God ultimately has a plan, and just keep pushing forward, because the end result is 100,000,000% worth it.
Yeah. I would say one of the best things that we did was let everybody know that we came across that we're looking to adopt. It wasn't a closely held secret. It was a shout to the world, we want to adopt. And that, because of that, is what eventually brought our match. It did take quite a bit longer than we anticipated, but then God's timing is not our timing, and I wouldn't change any of it for the world.
Yeah. And I know where we began tonight talking about the tears and the driving home, just so emotional and wondering when is this going to happen, to hear you be able to say that, Christa. That to me is some of the most inspiring encouragement to give anyone. Listening tonight or listening later, if adoption is on your heart, to not give up, and that it really is about this little boy. And I can't imagine him in any other family, and I'm sure it sounds like from the moment you set eyes on him that you couldn't imagine it any different. But I know it wasn't easy, but for you to have that kind of hindsight, I truly believe that that's what God is calling, everyone that is on this path, is to trust that they're going to get to that point that you just said, that you wouldn't have changed it. So thank you both. Such wise words. And I've tried to write down some of these quotes because I just think they're beautiful to inspire people, because I know this isn't an easy journey, and that's why lifetime education is really important to us. But sometimes part of that education is just running something by your coordinator and saying, is this normal, or should I consider something else? And so if you have those kinds of questions, just remember that Lifetime is happy to hear from you and be a help. But we are especially thankful for Jeff and Christa, for you to spend time with us tonight. So thank you again for being here. I love seeing you guys as parents.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I want to thank all of you who made time to join us tonight. And just remember, if you have questions or feedback after tonight's webinar, we would love to hear from you. You can email me. My email is libby@lifetimeadoption.com, or you can just reach out to your coordinator and let her know what spoke to you or what questions cropped up. But also, if you've not yet made contact with Lifetime and you want to learn more about the next step or what to expect or the resources available, you can always reach out to us at lifetimeadoption.com, or you can call 1-800-923-6784. We will talk with all of you again soon. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye-bye.